Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Öztürk, and on behalf of the project team, I would like to welcome you all for our first webinar session of the new year. Before we start, sticking to our tradition from last year, I would like to see where you are from, and you can just write where you are from into the chat box. Before we start, I would like to hand over to Roger Cohen, Regional English Language Officer of the United Embassy in Ankara. So, thank you for being with us, Roger.
Thank you so much, Hocam. It is an absolute delight and pleasure to be with the VIP network team again. This webinar has been going strong for several months now, this webinar series. And it is one of my favorite webinars in the entire country. And I am so happy that you are getting so many participants each webinar, and people are coming not just from Turkey, but from around the world. So thank you, Özge. Thank you, Dr. Solmaz, and to the entire VIP network. You're doing an amazing, amazing job. My name is Roger Cohen. I'm the Regional English Language Officer at the United States Embassy in Ankara. And we do all different kinds of English language teaching and learning programs all throughout Turkey. And I think in particular for everyone here tonight, whether you are at a university or a K through 12 institution or a private institution, we have really a lot of tremendous, great programs that I think you would be interested in. We do teacher trainings, both face-to-face and online. We bring American teachers to teach at various universities all throughout Turkey. We bring short-term experts and consultants to Turkey to do curriculum development and materials development and other teacher trainings. We also have a lot of different programs that send Turkish teachers and teachers from around the world to the United States, either for face-to-face programs or also online programs. And also recently, because of COVID, our office has really increased its digital footprint, and we offer all kinds of programs for teachers like yourselves, various large and small online learning programs for teacher training and other subjects. And everything that we do is free. Our goal is to increase English education all throughout Turkey wherever possible, and to create mutual understanding between American teachers and Turkish teachers. So if you are interested in any of our programs, please feel free to write me anytime at reloturkey@state.gov. That's reloturkey@state.gov. At the bottom of this slide, you can also see our website. It has all kinds of information there. And after this program tonight, our office has a newsletter with all of our programs and how you can sign up. And we would be happy to send it to all of you. And I hope you all take advantage. Again, everything we do is free and open to teachers throughout Turkey. So we would be delighted to work with you anytime. And I would like to give the floor back to Özge Hocam. Again, thank you so much for everything that you have done for this great webinar series. And I'm really looking forward to the speakers tonight. It's going to be a great program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for all your support so far. And we are really looking forward for the next coming webinars with you, Roger. Thank you very much. And now I would like to hand over to Dr. Solmaz on behalf of the project team for the opening remarks.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I know that it's the week where we are ending the semester throughout Turkey. And I also would like to welcome participants all over the world. We have around 300 people joining us right now. It's an amazing number, and I'm so excited to welcome everyone. On behalf of Dicle University, Department of Foreign Language Teaching, and Uludağ University, and our VIP Learning Network, team, as well as US Embassy for supporting us, and our speakers who are great in their field, and we can't wait to hear their presentations on world Englishes in English language teaching. And as you can see, this is the 5th version of our webinar, and we have 4 more left. I would like to announce news with you that on the final webinar, we will get to hear from yourself. As teachers, we would like to hear your reflections and your expectations. What have you changed, and how these webinars inspired you? Please let us know. At the end of the webinar, we will be sharing a link with you where you can share your thoughts with us. And hopefully we will make the final webinar all together. So with that being said, I would like to hand it over to Özge Hocam for kickstarting the webinar.
Thank you very much. And as we are all looking forward to today's webinar, I would like to start with our first speaker tonight. Our first speaker is Dr. Fuad Selvi, and he is an assistant professor of TESOL and Applied Linguistics and the chair of the Teaching English as a Foreign Language program at Middle East Technical University, Northern Cyprus campus. His research interests are global Englishes and its implications for language learning, teaching, teacher education, and language policy planning. Most importantly, he was recognized as one of TESOL International Association's 30 up-and-coming leaders in recognition of his potential to shape the future of both the association and the profession for years to come. So, Dr. Selvi, it is our great pleasure to have you tonight, and the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. Yes, hello, everyone, and greetings from Northern Cyprus. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, I believe everyone can see my screen right now with the title slide and everything.
Yes, everything seems okay.
Yes. All right, thank you. Once again, thank you very much. So first of all, I'd like to thank Osman Hocam and his team, and of course, Özge as well. Özge Hocam as well. So for their kind invitation to be with you this evening. I also would like to thank everyone for taking the time from your busy schedules and to be here with us tonight. Today, I'll talk about global Englishes, and I'll like to talk about 2 basic goals tonight. First of all, I'll briefly describe what global Englishes is and how we get here in the first place. And then I would like to talk about why it matters to you as a language teacher. I believe this portion of our conversation will serve as a nice foundation for the upcoming presentations, where my colleagues will give you and walk through with practical implications of the diversity within and beyond English language teaching classrooms. So let's start with a very basic questions. How many languages are there in the world? So what are your estimates? Well, if you ask linguists who are actually trying to document this statistics, so they're talking about more than 7,000 languages being spoken in the world, and of course in varying shapes and sizes, when with varying number of speakers. As of 2021, there are more than 7,000 languages in the world. Although 7,000 may look like a huge number, unfortunately, from time to time, languages disappear because there is no communities to sustain them. In fact, today, for about 40% of languages are considered as endangered status, which means that there are less than 1,000 speakers remaining. On the other hand of the spectrum, we got a list of 23 world languages, which account for more than half of the world's population. So the question is, what happens when languages go global, right? So in that case, when languages go global, they tend to spread themselves thinly and start diversifying, as Anna Marinen talks about. This is exactly what happened to the English language. So at this point, I would like to walk you through about the story of English real quick. So the language of Shakespeare, which was once confined to the British Isles, with a population of 5 to 7 million speakers, transformed itself into a global language, but more than 2 billion speakers in varying degrees of proficiencies. In other words, in the famous quotes, in the famous words of Shakespeare, all worlds is a stage and we're merely players, but who speak English in some ways. Well, to be more precise, to understand the global status of English today, if you look at the statistics, today non-native speakers of English outnumber their native English speaking counterparts by at least 3 to 1, according to recent estimates. In other words, between the reigns of Queen Elizabeth I and II, there has been more than 400 times of increase, and which is a staggering number to begin with. Thus, English is considered a language on which the sun never sets. But question is, I mean, perhaps no other language in the entire history of humankind has achieved the status that English has achieved today. But the question is, how did that exactly happen? So what makes English the global language? And of course, one can think of possible answers to this question, like the number of speakers, like Chinese, or the aesthetic qualities, like beauty or the clarity of expression, like, you know, for some people, French is considered to be a very beautiful language, or the literary tradition or the power that it has, like the English, with a number of different English authors and literary figures, or the religious, attached to religious importance, like Latin, remember, as the language of the Catholic Church. Or possible answers may also include, may adopt a linguistic perspective and focus on ease of learning or ease of grammar, like many other languages, or a combination of these factors as well. So, but if you think any of these are the reasons behind the current status and global role of that English enjoys today, the answer is unfortunately no. Well, if you listen to David Crystal, who's a prominent British sociolinguist, he argues that a language achieves a genuinely special status only when it's recognized in every country. And of course, when he talks about recognition of this role, he's talking about that a language should be, for a language to be considered global, it should be learned and spoken internationally. It should be characterized by both first and second language speakers. It should be used all around the world in different continents. It should be used in international organizations and associations for diplomatic relations and international communication. And perhaps most importantly, it should serve as a lingua franca, which means a link, a common link language between individuals who come from different ethno-linguistic backgrounds, who share no common language. Well, when we take a closer look at the language or the story of English over the past couple of centuries, we realize that these forces, these driving forces that you see here on this slide, all contribute to the current status of English as a global language for billions of speakers around the world, all the way from the colonialism to involuntary migration, transnational mobility, globalization, and with the technological innovations. They all are forces that contribute to the current status of English as an international language. Today, English is used as an official language in 88 countries, and it functions as one of the official or working languages in the world's major international organizations and associations, like the World Trade Organization, WHO, European Union, the World Bank, IMF, and others, so on and so forth. And as a result, according to World Power Language Index that you see here on this slide, which ranks languages on their efficacy in 6 different domains that you see here, based on geography, economy, communication, knowledge and media, as well as diplomacy, English is considered to be world's most powerful language. Well, this situation, the local situation here in Turkey and Northern Cyprus, is not so much different. And I'm sure for our international audience, colleagues from all around the world can relate to this very well. But just to give you a little snapshot of what it means for the local context, it is regarded as an essential skill for every educated citizen, every educated Turkish citizen. And let me show you a number of eye-opening statistics. First of all, there are nearly 1 million teachers in the Turkish state schools at K through 12 levels. And for about 65 of them are for about 75,000 of them are foreign language teachers, and for about 90% of them are teachers of English. So you can easily relate sort of the importance attached to English language at the educational level. At the higher education, the situation is not different. Students who complete their education at the K-12 schools, they transition to an undergraduate program. And now English, as you can see, dominates the foreign medium or foreign language related programs in Turkish universities. So the trend that we observed earlier also continues in higher education. And finally, these are the number of test takers in foreign language exam, YDS, which is once again a proof that English is the top choice for the Turkish speakers. So as English traveled around the world, either by choice or by force, it also fragmented into different native and nativized varieties, such as all the way from British English to Indian English to Nigerian English to Australian English. And this diversification also pluralized sort of the language from English to Englishes. So next time you see the word English in plural terms, you see that it's not a typo, it's nothing to be scared of, but it is how we reconceptualize our understanding of the pluralization of the English into different native and nativized varieties. And considering that non-native speakers outnumber their native speaker counterparts right now by at least 3 to 1, now scholars realize sort of the importance of fluid communication, right? Those contexts between individuals coming from different backgrounds use the language, use the English language, or rely on the English language as a common link, right? Or a lingua franca context. So what does it really mean for us as English language teaching professionals? So far, what I've shared with you actually was this sociolinguistic discussion, right? So in other words, we need to sort of take this and try to bring this to our own context as language teachers and teacher educators and see how it informs what we do on an everyday basis. For this, I would like to go back and rely on Sandra Lee McKay's very basic but yet very profound quote back in 2002. She says, and I quote, that teaching and learning of an international language must be based on an entirely different set of assumptions than the teaching and learning of any other foreign or second language for that matter. In other words, she says that we need to rethink about everything. We need to think outside the box. We need to revise what we've been doing so far, because the language that we're dealing with, the language that we're trying to teach is completely different from its status, its function, its role, its importance is entirely different from any other foreign or second language. So, like I said, this understanding creates a paradigm shift for us as language teachers and teacher educators. It brings us a set of, it's like the first piece of the domino, right? So it brings us a set of different questions to think about for all of us in this room, whether you're a teacher at K-12 settings or in higher education, or whether you're a teacher educator, or whether you're involved in a different aspect of the English language teaching enterprise. So in other words, we need to think about our everyday practices in light of these questions. First of all, the ownership, right? Who owns English language? Whose language is now English, right? Does it really and exclusively belong Anglo-American societies? Or is it now a global commodity, right? Is it now shared, the ownership is shared by everyone who speaks it, irrespective of their language status? Another question would be the interlocutors, right? Who are my students' target interlocutors? In other words, why do we learn English in the first place? Just like any other language, to speak with the native speakers of that language? Certainly, definitely, but does that really capture the entire picture, right? Of course, the answer is no. So in other words, we rely on English also to communicate with the speakers who are coming from diverse ethno-linguistic backgrounds. The other question is the target culture, right? Whose culture should we teach? What culture? Which culture? Whose culture, right? Again, do we really do, or don't we really do this service to our language learners if we only if we only focus on the Anglo-American cultural, if we base our teaching on the foundation of the Anglo-American societies? How about English? How about using English to learn about other cultures? Or how about using English to reflect upon our own culture, which we, in our primary socialization process that we've gone through in our first languages for the most part. The other question is, of course, what grammatical or pragmatic or cultural norms should they learn, right? And of course, the other question is who should teach them? Who are the teachers? Who is a legitimate teacher of English? Does being a native or non-native speaker really automatically guarantee being a better teacher? What do we gain or what do we miss by using these problematic terms? In other words, we also talk about the assessment criterion. How should I go ahead and assess my language learners when they use English language as a lingua franca? And of course, finally, what is the goal of learning? Who is the role model, right? Who is a role model for my students? And what is the role for language learning? Is it simply to achieve a native-like proficiency, or like be, sound, speak, act like native speakers, or being multi-competent speakers who can successfully navigate lingua franca encounters and who aim for communicative success? So in other words, these are some very basic but yet very profound questions that help us to rethink, reconceptualize, and revamp our beliefs and practices about English language and English language teaching and even teacher education. So in response to these questions that I shared with you earlier, Nicola Galloway and he they identify 6 proposals or ways that ELT professionals can infuse or include in their everyday practices. In the next presentations, Yasemin Hocam, Ali Hocam, and Vildan Hocam, they will offer their own insights into how some of these principles can actually inform their practices at various levels. So I won't go into further detail. So we, language teachers or teachers in general, like to have having very solid conclusions. So what is one big idea, or what are some couple of big ideas that I would like you to take away from this talk? First and foremost, my first suggestion is that we as ELT professionals should not really bury our hands in sand. The world around us is certainly changing. So, and of course, the sociolinguistic realities therein are in constant flux, in constant hybridity. So the question is whether we'll adopt and adapt to these changes or remain indifferent. The second question is, please do not consider global English as language teaching as a superior teaching approach. It basically, what it does very forcefully challenges sort of the inherent assumptions that serves as the foundation for English language teaching that inform how we conceptualize language teaching materials, assessment practices, or even the pedagogical practices that we inform our own practices, right? So it's not going to make into Diane Larson Freeman's next methodology book or into the collection of English language methodology. Rather, it serves as a macro lens in which we assess, or through which we understand and re-understand or re-examine the practices in the ELT. Global Englishes is actually a comprehensive set of ideas and questions that will help us challenge, transform, and interrogate sort of our own assumptions about each and every aspect of English language teaching, both English, what it means, what it stands for as a language, and as well as how it informs our teaching practices. In other words, we need to reevaluate everything in the light of our individual needs, right? Our local needs as language teachers and our local dynamics. In other words, what are some challenges? What are some possibilities in my own teaching context, so that I can try to answer all these questions in light of these principles. And finally, let's not forget the fact that it is all about us as language teachers, whether we like it or not. So anything we do in the name of English language teaching have significant implications and consequences for the individuals that we work with, as well as the societies there. And in other words, anything from the language policies to instructional practices that we adopt as language teachers, or the standards that we choose to impose or to use with our language learners have consequences. In other words, are you promoting an English-only classroom in your own teaching context, right? Are you using a fancy textbook that full of images about exotic places without any references to your students' own cultures or different cultures around the world? Are you penalizing your students for example, writing informations or not being able to differentiate between 3 and 3, right? Are you working in one of those private schools that simply look for certain type of teacher, right? Are you offering or not offering it to a teacher just because he or she is a native speaker or a non-native speaker, right? In other words, I'm not really saying, I'm not simply saying that you should do this or you should do that. So what I'm actually trying to say is that any decision that you make as language teachers will have important consequences on the individuals that you work with, and those choices that you make will be concretizing larger social, political, and ideological formations. So I'd like to end my session by reminding ourselves with the eternal words of Rumi, who once said, all the words that belong to yesterday are gone with yesterday, my dear. Now is the time to say something new. But the question is, are you really willing to take that step? Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for your introductory presentation, Ali Fuad Hocam.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Just a brief reminder for our participants, there will be a bigger Q&A session at the end of this 4th session. So now I would like to introduce our second speaker, Professor Dr. Yasemin Kırkgöz from Çukurova University. Her research interests are global Englishes, language policy, and planning. And she received many awards concerning her works. And now I would like to hand over to her for her presentation. We are really looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Özge, for this nice introduction. I also would like to thank Osman Hocam for his kind invitation. I feel honored to be here with my colleagues to be presenting in this very nice occasion. Thank you also for the participants for being with us. We have a large number of participants. I wish to extend my special thanks to Roger for sponsoring, for supporting such important projects in Turkey and for his contributions to for language teacher development in our country. So following on from Fuad Hocam, I'll be talking about globalization and foreign language curriculum changes, particularly related to the Turkish context. Although in the previous talk it was mentioned that globalization is an important concept, I'll be trying to relate it to the Turkish context. Well, as we all know, the world we live in thrives on change across different domains. This is the result of globalization. There is one element which plays a crucial role in this globalization, which is the language. Language is essential to this phenomenon as the major means of communication. The English language is closely linked to the process of globalization because of its status of functioning as the lingua franca in different domains, including science, technology, politics, and business. And as such, it has a very big influence on the cultural, political, economic, and educational life of many countries, as stated by Crystal. So the spread of English throughout the world as the lingua franca of international communication, along with globalization, has generated very considerable impact on language policies of many countries, and Turkey is one of such countries. So today, I'll be mainly focusing on foreign language curriculum, but I'll be relating all my talk to English language curriculum in our country, relating it to curriculum reforms. I'll be mainly focusing on curriculum reforms before I conclude. So I'll take you through a journey. In the participant, we have many English language teachers, and I hope those 3 years would remind you of important events that have taken place in our country. So we have 1997, 2005, and the year 2013 is the last stop in our journey. Maybe I can have some responses. Özge, maybe you can help me.
Yes, yes, I'm here.
From the participants. Okay, well, I'll continue. Okay.
So, Yasemin hocam, sorry to interrupt, but
so I just try to ask a question to the participant teachers about what they would associate those 3 years with.
Okay, and one thing concerning your presentation, we can't see the slides in case you started the slides. I just want to confirm. Did you start the slides? We can only see your first slide.
Oh, no. I have, I'm moving it.
Okay, so that's why I just want to kindly remind you, yeah.
I am in my third slide now.
Maybe you can start the slide presentation.
I'll stop and share it again.
Okay, that will be great.
Sorry about this.
No problem. Yes, we can see it now, but
now can you see?
After, maybe you should start the slideshow.
Okay. So I have already talked about the spread of English as the lingua franca of international communication.
Yes.
Along with globalization and having created impact on language policies of many countries, and Turkey is one of such countries. Can you see my slide now, new one?
Maybe can you make it full screen?
It is already full screen.
Okay, for us, we can only like see the PPT on the PPT format. Can you click the start slideshow? Now we can see the third slide.
Okay, well, I'll continue like
maybe
this.
Manually, yeah, it will be great.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
sorry
great.
about this.
No worries, no worries.
Right.
Yeah,
so
everything is okay.
I'll be mainly focusing on English language curriculum in Turkey, referring to curriculum reforms. So I'll take you through a journey. So the beginning part of our journey is the year 1997. In our audience, we have a large number of English teachers. I hope you can remember the year 1997 in relation to a major curriculum event. And then we will move on to the year 2005, and we'll continue and almost stop our journey in the year 2013. In fact, Turkey is located in a very important part of the world. As can be seen in this picture, Turkey acts as a kind of bridge between two major continents. Strategically, Turkey has a very, very important role. So the English language has a very important place in the school curriculum. In recognition of the importance of English language, we have had a number of curriculum reforms, as I try to illustrate in this journey metaphor. So the first curriculum reform took place over many years, starting from 1997, continuing until 1994 till 1997. It was called National Education Development Project. It took place between the Turkish Council of Higher Education, YÖK, and in cooperation with the Ministry of National Education. Ministry of Education is the responsible for the body dealing with school education, and the YÖK is responsible for higher education. So this cooperation was very important. This cooperation aimed to improve programs in teacher education, all programs, not only English language teaching, but other subject areas to enhance the quality of teacher education, because there was a need to enhance the quality of teacher education. How did this curriculum reform operate? In fact, because it was a major project, it was financed by the World Bank. Teams of Turkish researchers from the faculties of education collaborated with their colleagues from England and the United States of America, and they visited those countries to get insights into the teacher education program. In collaboration with foreign experts, they produced brand new courses in teacher education faculties. So the whole program lasted many years. How did this affect school curriculum? This part of this curriculum reform involved school curriculum. As part of this reform, primary and secondary education was combined. Previously, we had 5 years of primary and 3 years of secondary school education. Those two schools were combined, and we had 8 years of compulsory primary education, followed by 3 years of secondary education. And the way it influenced English was also very important. English started to be taught to students at grade 4 and 5 in primary education. Before this reform, English was taught only in secondary schools. The starting age was secondary school, to secondary school students. In terms of pedagogy, the curriculum, the primary curriculum document stated, encourage teachers to use communicative language teaching as a pedagogy to enhance students' communicative abilities. And with this came a change in the role of teachers and students, because teachers were encouraged to collaborate with their students during this project, during this process. Specifically, the objectives of the 1997 curriculum was to increase students' awareness of what a foreign language is, to help them get positive attitude towards learning English, because English was the only compulsory school subject, and increase students' interest and motivation towards this language, and establish classroom situations through games, activities, dialogue, so that students, children could communicate in the target language. Although the curriculum at macro level had such objectives, a number of studies I conducted in my city and other studies conducted in different cities, in different places, contexts showed that there was a gap between the Ministry of Education's policy at macro level and how teachers taught English in their micro classroom context. In fact, such difficulties, such challenges are not restricted to Turkey only. When we have a look at global context to other countries, we can see that countries like China, in the Asian part of the world, Japan, some countries in Europe, such as Spain and Italy, and countries in the South America were also introducing, they were also involved in similar curriculum changes, and teachers were experiencing similar challenges to those of Turkish teachers. About 7 years later, we had the second round of curriculum reform. In our journey, this corresponds to the year 2013. And the curriculum document, again, kept communicative-oriented aspect of teaching English, but added some new ideas to teaching, such as Gardner's multiple intelligences was one of the ideas that was introduced. Teachers were encouraged to use a variety of techniques, a variety of methods, considering varied intelligences that learners might have. So some learners would learn through pictures, others through movements, and so on. Gardner's multiple intelligence theory was very much highlighted in the curriculum document. Textbooks also try to reflect curriculum objectives in their activities, in their designs. For example, this activity taken by one of the English textbooks highlights linguistic intelligence, verbal linguistic intelligence. Since this is a kind of dialogue, there is also interpersonal intelligence highlighted or practice. This picture coming from another textbook could be an example to enhancing learners' naturalistic intelligence. This could be mathematical intelligence and also listening and speaking verbal linguistic intelligence. So I'm referring to mainly the textbooks published locally because English textbooks used in state schools are sponsored by the ministry and they are produced by locally by Turkish authors. In the textbooks, following the 2003 curriculum innovation, curriculum change, we can see some references to different culture because culture is also a very important element. It is agreed that when learning a foreign language, you can also learn the culture of that language. But here the issue was what type of culture to include in the textbooks. When we have a look at illustrations, pictures, texts, and so on in the English textbooks, we can see that there are lots of references to the source culture as can be seen in these illustrations, in these pictures. So they are references to the Turkish culture, to the source culture. We can see a picture of Atatürk, Turkish coffee, and Ata Kule in Ankara. There were also references to the target culture. By target culture, I'm referring to the British culture or American culture. So as can be seen in these illustrations. there were also references to culture other than British or American, in other words, international target culture through pictures or reading texts of like Japanese cuisine, sushi, and some reading texts from Egypt or other cultures. So the culture was covered on a very broad scale through the textbooks. I'm referring to the textbooks because teachers have textbooks as the main source of materials to use. Of course, they can use some other materials. Well, in fact, there is a lot to talk about curriculum in detail, but I will be focusing on the main points of curriculum elements, curriculum objectives. In the course of time, the ministry considered that there was further need for innovation in the English curriculum. This was the result of global changes and their effects on society, demanding new knowledge, new skills, and these skills come from the, of course, children, school children. So the education is provided by schools. So the government decided to improve the education system further to keep up with global changes, with international changes. Another need arose Turkey's desire to be a member of European Union, to join European Union, to gain that membership. And we wanted to bring some kind of standardization to our English curriculum. Common European Framework of Reference is the curriculum framework used in Europe or in many other countries. So our curriculum also got influenced by this framework. So we had a third round of curriculum innovation. The ministry emphasized the need for this third round of curriculum innovation in its document, in this very nice quotation that I'm going to read out. It says, there is no question that the key to economic, political, and social progress in contemporary Turkish society depends on the ability of Turkish citizens to communicate effectively on an international level, and competence in English is a key factor in this ability. So this comes directly from the curriculum document produced by the Ministry of National Education. So here, the common points for the all curriculum reforms is to get Turkish children to communicate effectively at the national level as well as at the international level, and to gain this competence through English, because English is the global language and it is very important for the country's economic, political, and social progress, as stated in this document. But unfortunately, one main problem was that although the ministry aimed to get school leavers to reach a certain level of proficiency, this was not always the case. So we had the third round of curriculum reform. It is a reform because the curriculum document was reproduced, rewritten as part of a project called 4+4+4. I'm sure you are all familiar with what each 4 represents. Each one represents one round of education: primary education, middle or secondary, and high school education. Here we had in the year 2013 some major changes taking place. We had English language, the starting age of English language was lowered even further to grade 2, which corresponded to between 6 and 7 years of age. So Turkish children started learning English at lower ages in state schools, because private schools would have, earlier age as well. As we can see, we have had a lot of changes, evolution in our curriculum, and this is in line with curriculum changes taking place globally in other countries. I've been using the keyword, I've been referring to the keyword curriculum many times, so I decided to introduce these two definitions. In fact, these are, curriculum definition that we are all familiar with. The curriculum is a plan and guided learning experiences. They are planned by the ministries. They guide teachers and learners to bring out intended outcomes, which are hidden in the curriculum objectives. Those outcomes are formulated through the systematic reconstruction of knowledge and experiences under the auspices of the school. So here, the teacher has a very, very important role to turn those objectives into learning outcomes through their effective teaching practices. Another definition of curriculum is that it is a framework for the planning and implementation of education programs. As we have seen, we have had 3 curriculum reforms through framework of curriculum documents. This is the 2013 curriculum document, and this was also produced as part of a project, this time between Ministry of National Education and TÜBİTAK. I was also involved in this project. Teachers would be all familiar with this because the document is available online. At lower levels, but listening and speaking skills are emphasized, and other skills are gradually introduced in upper levels. One interesting aspect of this curriculum is that, in fact, the 2013 curriculum was slightly updated in the year 2017 and 18, but I do not consider it as a major reform. It is just an update. One important concept that was introduced to our education system is that values education was introduced through English. Our teachers would know that values education is being practiced in school curriculum in many subjects for the last 10 years or so, but it is quite a recent phenomenon that values are introduced through foreign language curriculum. And the ministry has 8 values in the curriculum document. And the idea is to enhance, to consolidate students' acquisition of values through foreign language by using different activities and so on. So friendship, honesty, fairness, patriotism, respect, responsibility, helpfulness, and kindness are listed as values that teachers can focus upon. I have some examples from the textbooks. Textbooks, when we have a look at English textbooks, we can see very nice examples of values. Either, we can see them very overtly, or sometimes we can, infer, okay, this activity or this task would highlight this value. We can deduce it from our interpretation. This is a very nice example of greeting. It comes from a grade 2 English textbook. Okay, and making a poster about greeting using the greeting related words. So greeting value as a value. Another value, kindness. So in my interpretation, according to my interpretation, this could be an example of kindness. So while matching, so all the teachers can do would be to emphasize it more so that students can really internalize it more through English. This would also be an example of friendship. There are very nice activities involving children playing together to enhance friendship value. We have one more activity related to friendship: listen and follow, and draw your best friend and write. So it is clear that learners would be practicing friendship as a value through English. Well, after an overview of curriculum reforms, I have been mainly referring to curriculum objectives, curriculum documents. What about the teachers? Of course, teachers have a very, very key role in the successful implementation of the curriculum, because curriculum is produced by curriculum specialists. In the final curriculum, there were some English teachers whose opinions were consulted in producing the curriculum, but on a smaller scale, of course. But when we have a look at the whole country, teachers have a very important role in putting curriculum objectives into their into classroom practices through applying effective pedagogies. As mentioned by Carles, who has done extensive research in China in relation to curriculum, if teachers are to implement an innovation successfully, it is essential that they understand both the theoretical principles and classroom applications of the proposed change. So it is very important for us as teachers to consult curriculum and then to put those principles into practice through our pedagogies. In conclusion, the desire to conform to a wider international education agenda has necessitated making a number of adjustments in Turkish foreign language education policy. And Turkey has been involved in through a planned language policy to respond to the challenges brought about by globalization. And we need to add internationalization as well through educational reform initiatives. In my opinion, we are one of the countries that we have been, successful in such initiatives, but of course it would be nice to hear teachers' voices as well. I would like to thank you all for listening to me. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for your informative presentation.
My pleasure.
And before we start with the third speaker, I would like to remind our social media accounts. You can find them in the chat, and all the presentations from tonight will be uploaded to our website, project website. You can find them there. Now, I would like to introduce our third speaker tonight, Dr. Vildan İnci Kavak from Gaziantep University.
Yes, hello. I'm just trying to organize my, I think it's okay. Okay, yes. Yeah, hello, everybody. Good evening. So I just want to start my talk by thanking all the organizing committee of VIP Learning Network webinar for making this happen and bringing us together in this informative event. And also thank you to the audience for sparing time. And in the framework of teaching world English in global language classroom, I'll be talking about models of bilingualism and multilingualism with a special focus on translanguaging and classroom translanguaging. I'll provide you with a sample lesson for creating multilingual atmosphere, some resources and ideas, and we'll end with some suggestions. So when we look at the models of bilingualism and multilingualism, there are 3 different models. The first 2 were coined by Cummins in successive years. And also we've got translanguaging theory, and it's also called dynamic theory or dynamic bilingualism. So these are important because they have an important effect on language policies and also classroom practices in the at different levels of education. So so the first one is separate underlying proficiency model. As you can see from the picture, so this model states that proposes that languages are separate from each other. They have independent boundaries, and they are firm and fixed.
Vildan Hocam, sorry, but we can only see the first slide of your presentation.
Oh, really? I will share it again, actually. Okay, let's
just to inform you, sorry.
Yeah, just okay. Let's see. And please tell me if you can see it. Okay, you can see now?
Now, yes.
And if I make it, so can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it, but when you...
Only the first slide you can see, or can you see a head with the picture of a head?
Yes, we can see the layout of PPT PowerPoint. So maybe you can make it full screen.
Yeah, I was making a full screen, but
now it is on the 4th slide.
Oh, right. Okay. So what about now? Because I made a full screen.
Oh, it's not full screen, I think. It's not full screen.
Then I understand there's a problem with the full screen.
Full screen. I think there's a problem with full screen, so maybe you should go manually. I don't know.
Because I did some transitions, so okay. Okay, then we'll have to go like this, I think.
Yes. Unfortunately.
Sorry about that. Okay, so we'll do like this then.
Okay.
Okay, I was talking about the first model. Yes, so you can see, so L1 and L2 are separate from each other. They are separate systems, and they have clear boundaries, and there are no transfers between them. And that's why students should only be exposed to English or the target language. So these are the times when L1Us were banned in the classroom. And when we look at the second one, it's called Common Underlying Proficiency Model. It's also called Iceberg Hypothesis, because when you look at the picture, on the top, languages look like different systems, but when you look at the underlying features, you will see some common features. So, there are transfers available. So they are not, languages are not kept in completely separate compartments in the brain. There are connections between them. So scholars use this information, and they did contrastive analysis and to be able to identify the potential problems of the students. So again, in the classroom, they didn't use L1, but they just used L1 for as a base, and to be able to understand how learners can get the proficiency of L2. But when we look at the third one, it's called translanguaging theory or dynamic bilingualism, and it proposes that no languages are superior to another. So each speaker has a unique linguistic personal linguistic repertoire, and this linguistic repertoire is collected through dynamic social interactions. And Garcia states that the connection between languages are very similar to a banyan tree and its branches, because when you look at the tree, it's very hard to understand which ones are roots, which ones are branches. So languages are interconnected, just like the branches of a banyan tree. So they grow vertically, horizontally, on the surface, under the ground. And so if we want to describe or define translanguaging, we can say it's coined by Sam Williams in 1994 in Welsh context, and it basically refers to the practices where L1 and L2 are used together. So Garcia has a beautiful quotation about translanguaging. She says it's an approach to bilingualism that's centered not on languages, as has often been the case, but on the practices of bilinguals that are readily observable. So it focuses on the performance, not the named languages as socio-linguistic entities. So these worldwide translanguaging practices are seen here not as marked or unusual, but rather taken for what they are, namely the normal mode of communication. So translanguaging, if you want to look at it affixationally, so translanguaging in trans refers to the across, beyond, through, changing, thoroughly, and ink adds the meaning of continuity or longevity of the process. So we can say this, these practices blur the boundaries because it creates synergy, and it refers to the multiple discursive practices in which bilinguals engage in order to make sense of their bilingual words. So here, languages shouldn't be considered as a set of pre-given features and discrete skills anymore. Rather, they should be accepted as ongoing process that only exists as languaging. So speakers use translanguaging for meaning-making process. So what about in translanguaging in education or L1 use in education? It has always been a controversial issue because there are some scholars who are for, some others who are against it, and they've got some justifications. But there's a recent quote by Garcia, Johnson, and Seltzer, and they suggest for potential benefits of using L1 in the classroom, or let's say translanguaging in the classroom. It supports students' comprehension, so make them understand a challenging text better, and help students to develop linguistic practices for academic context. And it creates space for students' bilingualism, and also it encourages students to preserve their bilingual identities and socio-emotional development. And so when you look at the context, and if think about your own context, because there are some teachers and practitioners from different countries I know now as an audience. In Turkish context and in many contexts, we know that students come into the classroom at different levels of English proficiency. And in Turkey, English is spoken as the foreign language. So when students go out of the classroom, they have nowhere else they can practice English. So expecting students to use English constantly is kind of unrealistic. So these students who use L1 in the classroom are considered or are blamed for being lazy, underachievers. In the classroom, they are seen as underperforming or failing students, but rather we should treat them as learners in the progress of building up a complex knowledge of a new and more practical language in between. So we know previous theories so see languages as two separate systems, and this creates a competition between them. So it makes us and learners and teachers think that students give us that not there yet feeling, and also expecting them to master their target language as well as their L1. But we know that learners never or rarely master their English in this context. as much as their L1. So classroom translanguaging. So advantages of translanguaging in the classroom. We know it's a common practice, especially where students' mother tongue is different from the language of instruction. And we know L1 use encourage learners to participate and elaborate and raise questions. They contribute more to the lesson when they have the opportunity of using their L1. And they also build rapport between students and between teacher and the students. And so teachers and students cooperate to co-construct of the content of the lesson. So if students use their L1 and L2 strategically, their language skills and content mastery will improve simultaneously. So there are some strategical translanguaging practices, some of the translanguaging moves that are used by teachers. And so these are some examples, but you can think of more. Using a text that's in one language, in English, for example, and you can discuss it in your mother tongue. And you can move from a text in one language to another text. You can use bilingual or multilingual text depending on the profile of your students. And you can discuss in one language and check understanding or ask comprehension questions in another language. You can read in one language and write in another language or vice versa. Discuss in one language and write in another language. Again, in this way, you can integrate students' entire linguistic repertoire. So they don't only use the target language, they use their mother tongues, and so it's good for them. So they don't need to fall behind in their mother tongues for improving their target languages. So here I will share a sample lesson plan. That's a recent publication by me and Yasemin hocam. And so you can use this with students who are at B1 plus level or higher. And so the context, so students collaborate in a poetry analysis and creative writing task. And in this activity, they will be able to read, analyze, comprehend, and translate the poem The Road Not Taken, the popular poem by Robert Frost. So they can compare and contrast the two versions of poems in L1 and L2 and develop creative writing skills and achieve bilingual content mastery. And here you can show them a picture of a fork road and the title of the poem can be given, and you can start a bilingual discussion. They can contribute in their target language or in their mother tongue and get some predictions from the students. And in the end, when you elicited enough, you can ask them to read aloud, and you can also read aloud first and ask them to read aloud. And then you can answer the comprehension questions. And here is the poem and the pictures. And then for the second step, that's the analysis of the poem. If they are familiar with analyzing a poem structurally, you can study the rhyme, meter, poetic devices. But if they are not, you can just look at some expressions in the poem and ask them and get their contributions. So it can be in any language, and they can make inferences and interpretations regarding why the poet might have used certain keywords. If they are at the level of B1 plus or higher, you can ask these keywords, or if their level is lower, you can ask less traveled road or more traveled road or grassy road. What does it mean in the poem? Just get some ideas. And for the third step of the activities, you can put them into groups depending on the number of the students and ask them to translate. And translation is a very good way of using translanguaging in the classroom. and then make sure the students share the same mother tongue. So in our Turkish context, we have students from Syria, Saudi Arabia, Somali. So if you can put the Arabic students together, so they can share the same mother tongue and also use their linguistic repertoire together. And you can walk around, monitor them, and evaluate. They can ask you questions about various translations. So encourage them to write, check, edit, revise, and produce the final draft of their copy. And in this way, they can use their whole linguistic repertoire in both languages in various combinations. And for the last step, ask them to nominate a volunteer to come to the front of the classroom and share their translation. And as a teacher, give them feedback and suggestions, and also ask the other members of the groups and encourage them. So which parts are good, which parts need improving. So what are the other ideas they come up with? And in this way, their linguistic knowledge is expanded with each group's contribution, and they can increase, this activity can increase the students' metalinguistic awareness, so they can spot the nuances between similar looking expressions. And then you can provide them with the translation by a translator, or I think he's also a poet, and ask them to compare and contrast their own version and this version, which one is better, and ask them to comment on their own work and ask them to reflect. And also there are some extension activities, and you can ask them to write a short essay on their choices as a group and their outcomes in English. So they can take this lesson as an introductory course, and then they can study other poems by Robert Frost, like Stopping by Woods or Tree at My Window. And maybe you can organize a competition, or they can write a creative poem in L1 and translate them into L2, and they can actually represent it, choose somebody again, and then show it to each other at the end of the term. And what are the interactional patterns that we see in the classroom? So you can just adapt them to your own context. So you can say, in English, we say, for example, undergrowth. What about in your home language? Or how do you say something in your home language, in Turkish, for example, in our context? So so Turkish words do you know for this topic? So if they are writing the poem, for example. And work in pairs, one student says the word in English and the other can say it in Turkish or in their L1, then you can switch. I am going to ask questions in English, but if you like, you can answer in Turkish, for example. You can start in your mother tongue, and then you can move to English later on. You can stop the start, and at different parts of an activity, you can put stages. You can use your mother tongue to discuss this topic in your pairs, and then report it back to the class in English. So you can see, you ask them to process information multilingually. Okay, so now we have some time for questions in Turkish or in English. If the target language is in English, you can give them, like, you know, at the end of a task or activity, just a couple of minutes to ask their Turkish questions or questions in Turkish. Make a list of new words, ask them to have a notebook, a bilingual notebook, and they can write the English and the Turkish equivalences of the words. And here, when teachers employ these sorts of interactional cues, students will have the opportunity to translate between languages, compare and be playful with different languages, mix words and expressions from different languages in the same spoken or written utterance, and use the home language in one part of an activity and the target language in another part. So you can see they can be playful with the languages they already have. And there's another activity, I will go through it very briefly. And that's a task-based activity. As you know, food is a very common topic and a lot can be taught and studied about it. It's a multicultural topic and it covers culture, language, and you can ask some warm-up questions and so they can talk about their favorite homemade dishes, traditional food, and then you can show them the pictures of the jury members of MasterChef. They are very popular. So Gordon Ramsay is very popular in America, and these guys are popular in the UK, and these are the jury members in Turkey. So I am sure they've got a lot to say about them. And then you can give them a task so they can decide on one signature dish, and they will decide as a group, and they will decide everything, the look of, the appearance of the dish, and the ingredients, how it's gonna be served, the stages of the dish, and let them use both or more languages that they have. And for the task, it's made of 3 stages. First, they decide the name of the dish, ingredients, cooking tools, level of difficulty, time, and special features. In L1, in L2, doesn't matter. So then they write the instructions as a group, and then they edit what they have done and get it ready to report to the classroom. And so these are the worksheets that I have prepared. I also had a trial run for this, and it went very well with university students. They loved the activity, and also when they are listening to each other, you can give them a while listening task. So you give them a reason while they are listening, and also they can help the other groups if they are using some words in L1. So if they know, they can contribute. And so you can give them a checklist like this. And in this way, they take advantage of each other's linguistic repertoire. And also, if you like, you can just listen to them and monitor them and see what weaknesses they have. So are they weak in, for example, cooking verbs or sequencers or food lexes in general? And then you can take it as a needs analysis and then help them and organize your lessons and your content accordingly for the future. And or you can ask them to give the same recipe for a cookbook prepared in English and Turkish. So you can ask them to prepare a bilingual cookbook, and or also in Arabic in our context, and ask them to use visuals as well, you know. So this one is designed as a practice activity. So these are only some possible resources and activities that encourage multilingual interaction and create a multilingual ecology atmosphere in the classroom. And basically an effective activity can be used with some multilingual touches and twists. I'm sure you already have lots of good activities that are already in use. So if you just change your attitude, if you're not familiar with these practices, because as Ali Fuad Hocam said, it's not a new theory. It's just a new lens, way of looking at the things. So there is an observation checklist here. When you are monitoring students, you can use a simple checklist and see when and where they translanguage more. Is it because they lack the vocabulary? Is it because they are not good at writing or speaking? Are they on task, off task? So are they checking what they have understood is correct or not? Checking comprehension, incomprehension, and then organize. You know, it also helps you where they need help if you are teaching at lower levels. And then I will give my suggestions. So teachers should be more welcoming for L1 use by being aware of their benefits to their courses. So teachers and policymakers should address students' language needs and tailor their policies and resources accordingly by conducting a needs analysis. And continuous multilingual language support and atmosphere should be provided, maybe some extracurricular activities. And a more multilingual perspective should be adopted to keep pace with rapid changes in knowledge in a global world. And L1 use should be more planned and strategic to maximize students' linguistic and cognitive capability. And L1 use should be introduced into education schemes as a contemporary teaching and learning strategy. So prospective teachers should be prepared for the changing classroom environment. And for the last word, please, please don't silence your students with English. Let them speak in L1, in L2, and encourage them to contribute to the lesson. Thank you for listening to me. Danke, gracias, teşekkürler. So thank you in all languages.
And thank you very much for your interesting presentation, Vildan Hocam.
Thank you.
And now I would like to move to our fourth speaker tonight. And Dr. Ali Karakaş, and he is working as an associate professor at the English Language Teaching Department of Mehmet Ersoy University, Burdur, Turkey. He is also a postdoctoral member of the Center for Global Englishes, Southampton University, UK. Also, he's a great colleague and an old friend of mine from Bachelor Studies. So it's a great pleasure to have you today. Ali Hocam, the stage is yours.
Özge Hocam, thank you so much for this nice introduction. And I also feel great honor to have studied with you almost, I guess, 10 years ago or more than 10 years ago. So I'd like to also extend my gratitude to the participants. I know I'm the last speaker. There's this cognitive load on their minds. And I also see that the number of participants are decreasing slowly, but no worries, I'm gonna present something very practical. It will be like something complementary to all the speakers, especially starting with Ali Fuad Hocam, who just mentioned these paradigm shifts, the needs for innovation in language teaching. But first thing first, Özge Hocam, please confirm whether you can see the screen in the full version or not.
Unfortunately, we cannot. Now we can see, yes.
Okay, so it works. I'm so happy for this.
I'm so happy as well.
So in this part of the presentation, I'd like to just suggest a couple of practical, activities and tasks that teachers might actually use to raise their students' awareness about the notion of diversity. Word Englishes or global Englishes, it doesn't matter which notion we actually mention or refer to. What we just actually refer to, just raise their awareness about the diversity, as also Vildan Hocam mentioned, right? Diversity in the use of L1, for example. We have these actually multilingual or bilingual makeup or student cohorts in Turkish schools, right? Due to this immigration, the Syrians. Now it's quite common, for students to switch to different languages, even in Turkish classrooms, even in Burdur. So what I'd like to mostly talk about some of the actual tasks that I have actually got involved in doing, also some of the tasks that I've just found online from other contexts. So let's start. First thing first, I'd like to mention these. First thing, I also actually use with the students, especially collaborating with language teachers from the Ministry of National Education, state sector mostly. The first sector, I just named it, engaging students with non-Turkish speakers in the classroom. This wasn't actually quite possible previously, especially when I was a student at the secondary school, where I just started learning English at the 6th grade. There wasn't actually many foreigners around us, but currently, due to this mobility, the technological advances, also the decreasing prices in these airfares, it's possible we have these international students. So after coming from the UK, I just thought about, okay, how can I actually have or use these resources and contribute to these learners' awareness of this diversity? Because there's one thing I just noticed with learners when I just went to schools for these teaching practices and to observe our student teachers, most of the students actually don't think that English is something actually beneficial or useful for them. They have this question mark, what good English would do to me, right? İngilizce ne işime yarayacak? So translanguaging here. So I was actually curious because to some extent they were right. When I just observed the classrooms, what our student teachers just did was to teach them like grammatical information, vocabulary in the most traditional ways, bilingual list of words. I just said maybe we might just actually raise learners' motivation, plus raise their willingness to communicate with others, so that we could create a real, a genuine, authentic reason to use to learn English. Because learning English is quite different from learning maths, because language, again, in reference to your father job, there was this ERT, and we should also understand, conceptualize, reconceptualize the notion of language. It's not something like static, like it's dynamic, it's fluid, it's also evolving. So I just thought what we can do, and time when I just see a couple of international students, I just thought maybe we might just reach some international students and create a kind of a project in which we might just send these students to schools, maybe for like 1 class hour or 2 class hours per week, so that they could have these interaction with the learners. And we finally ended up with a project called Interactive English Classes Project. And we did this together with the Provincial Director of National Education, Burdur, and with the help of METU School of Education or Faculty of Education. The first thing that I did, I just contacted the student services and identified all the international students that are enrolled in our faculty. Later on, we just contacted them. I had a meeting with these students, and with the voluntary ones, we just started sending students to one school only. But later on, it became very widespread. You know, it also found some kind of media coverage. The other schools contacted us. We did not contact them. The other schools actually demanded that they like to be part of the project. But the problem at the time of initiating the project, we didn't have many international students, and we even used students from the department. They actually guised themselves like foreigners with nicknames, but the students were actually quite content and happy. But the problem, Burdur is a very small province. When they went out, some students just noticed that their teachers are also speaking Turkish while shopping in the stores. This was something like quite interesting. And within the project, we just selected the first school, and once a week, these students went to the schools and just spent time speaking and talking with the learners about anything the students are interested in. So there was no focus on grammar. There was no explicit grammatical information or teaching grammatical points. It was only about speaking anything the students are interested. And I've got some actually photos from the classrooms. As you might see here, even during the pandemic, we continued to actually run the project with students that we could have. And I just found these students from Tömer, who came from Nigeria. And one day, when I just about to leave the faculty, I've just seen a group of Nigerian students who are just leaving the other faculty. And I just approached them and asked them. So they just said they're studying Turkish at Tömer. I said, okay, we have this project. Would you like to take part in? And they were actually great. They showed great interest. And I took them to the class. I don't know whether you can see the full picture, but the first thing students ask, how do you dance in your culture, in your own country? So here they were just dancing. And they didn't ask the question in the way actually I formed the question. They just used the content words. How dance, your culture, country. But the students understood. Please excuse my voice, it might get creaky. I've been just recovering from a serious sickness. And later on, again, they spent some time and we physically visited the schools. I also arranged a time where they could come together on Zoom in their actual classes last year during the pandemic. And it was quite surprising for these students. These are secondary school students. And the school is based on an area, which is actually a rural area in Burdur. Students come from middle-income families, and they don't actually have much interest in English. As the teacher confirmed here, standing next to me, the students actually have no interest in English. Their level of English proficiency is quite low. But after such kind of visits, they became quite interested because maybe for the first time in their lives, they've just seen a real need. Even to be able to say, utter a couple of words in English. They could just see that they could use English with different speakers. Previously, they had the belief that, the teacher is Turkish, they're mostly Turkish, so what's the point of just communicating through English? They even demanded that the teacher should speak Turkish in most cases. And this is another international student, a different school. And the good thing, they were actually studying at the Faculty of Education. So they have these pedagogical skills. And we cannot put any random student from the faculty or from other faculties just to teach English. We might just take them like maybe just for speaking, but these teachers also got involved in teaching. This was something quite actually interesting, and the students really liked them because they know that the teacher cannot speak Turkish. So they forced themselves to be able to communicate with the limited resources available. You should have seen, actually how they actually managed to communicate, get across their messages. They ask about their favorite colors, movie stars, anything that you might just think about these young learners or adults. They were actually curious about their backgrounds, why they are in border especially. This is also another student, again, a full-time student from Ukraine. Her name is Vera, but unfortunately in her second grade, she just actually transformed to a different university. But we actually got lots of help from Vera. She was quite good at communicating and using English, also establishing rapport with the students. This is also quite important. Here, you might just see some actually pictures and visuals and students actually what they just think about the teacher. And a couple of comments from the learners. Okay, here, especially what this student 10 just remarked, it was quite important. You see, their understanding of English was quite different. And after they got this first-hand experience with these international students, they just thought that, well, okay, English has become a global language. You might use it with different speakers from around the world, even in border, right? It's quite against what we've just actually previously formed in our minds. Language or English should be learned, which might be spoken in an English native context, and you should sound like them. This was the idea of the methods and approaches that emerged in 1960s, 70s, let's say. But currently, as Arif Hocam said, this is not the case. The socio-linguistic profile of the speakers have dramatically changed. We have lots of international people around us, especially, I might also say this, in border we have these marble companies. So it's quite ordinary and usual here to come across Chinese, even Chinese restaurants, because these guys are into this marble industry. And they mostly communicate with the local people through English because it's really hard to find Chinese-speaking Turkish people here, but it's quite common. Even the shopkeepers have this survival English to communicate, to get into trade with these kind of Chinese actually marble guys. So these are all actual factors that actually existing in our neighborhood, in our actually nearby surroundings. So we are just trying to use these resources for the sake of improving students. First of all, to make them open-minded and see how different people are using English in different ways, but successfully and effectively. Again, this is from an online Zoom class. Secondary students, and we have this Nigerian student communicating with the learners, and she gets real responses, maybe at the level of phrases or words, but still students are actually receiving and decoding the message. And the way Nigerians actually speak is quite different from the Turkish people ways of saying English. But after a couple of weeks, they got familiar with the way these speakers actually use English. So this is quite important, right? First thing first, exposure to diversity. And secondly, developing the familiarity and intelligibility develops in parallel with this kind of amount of exposure. But for this to happen, actually, as again, Arif Hocam noted, it all just comes down to teachers. as teachers, we should be willing to innovate, right, in our practices. And often, even the research findings indicate resistance comes from the teachers. They often complain about the lack of resources, but even the teachers, can find ways to innovate, to modify their practices in line with the growth and spread of English, the diverse uses of English, and we have lots of resources actually. The only thing we should be concerned about it, right? We should actually leave our comfort zones. So here we have a student from Afghanistan who was full-time student, who did his undergraduate studies here, master's degree here, Nur Rahman. The first time I took Nur Rahman to a high school, the students were quite actually scared. And I guess also they were uneasy because of his physical appearance, long mustache and beard. But later on, they got spent so much time, they got to know each other much better. So and his English was quite well, fluent, but of course fluent in the way like he speaks Pashto. His mother tongue was Pashto. Sometimes he also gave examples from his culture, the food, the stuff, the naan or something similar like kebab, but with different spices, of course. Even the teachers were quite happy with these kind of actual visits. Also, we used our Erasmus students from Poland, Polina, and we also awarded them with certificates in appreciation for their actually time and effort. They got also quite happy they got these experience. And the Polonian guys, again, before they just leave our university. And later on, this is something I got alerted by a close friend, Sultan Atalay. I guess she's also among the participants. She might be listening to us. She sent me an email about her potential research topic for master thesis. And afterwards, I just checked the speaking club. This is an actually interesting project. They come together with different participants from different worlds on an online platform. So this is a good example of actually collaborative online international learning. So there are actually no limits and boundaries. As long as we put the required time and effort, as you see, we can actually raise learners' awareness through such kind of projects. So what do? They come together once a week. They just talk about a predetermined topic. Most students determine the topic, something like within their of interests or hobbies, let's say. This is just a screenshot from their actually Instagram account. You can also see they have these actually information at various websites of the schools or Directorate of National Education in Milli Eğitim Müdürlüğü websiteleri. And here, when you look at the participants or participating countries, you're going to see a diverse or a wide range of countries actually. Polish, Romanian, Ukrainian, students from Uzbekistan, Pakistan, even from Indonesia, Vietnam, and Tunis. Maybe physically or one-on-one, right? It's quite difficult, maybe impossible to come across with these speakers within our own context. But thanks to these online platforms, like online, let's say, like Zoom or Skype, let's say Microsoft Teams, it becomes possible right now. And there are lots of websites where you can actually look for partners or other, members or project members. So this is something quite, and I also shared this with the local directors of national education authorities here. They also quite like the idea. The last time I checked, they were also trying to do something similar, but I don't know. Maybe they've already initiated something similar or still trying to find some kind of partners. The second activity I might just suggest is to use audio-based or visual and audio-based resources. Thanks to the internet, as I said, English also dominates the internet, right? When you look at the number of websites presented in English, the number is quite large. Even in countries like Turkey, most of the websites are bilingual, right? They also give the option to navigate through the pages in the medium of English. Sometimes, yes, content does not actually reflect the Turkish content, but at least you can see the basics. So within this activity, what might be done? The teachers might actually use these video clips from movies, especially Bollywood movies, for example. This is something I did previously while offering these listening and pronunciation classes. TV series are quite useful. Even the TV series produced in these Anglophone countries actually feature lots of non-native speakers with these stereotypical or typical accents like Russian accent, German accent, very heavy accents. But these are actually good resources like open or eye-opener activities songs, especially teenagers, just think about high school students, or secondary school students. This is part of their lives. They listen to songs. So why not we just channelize them, to listen to songs, English songs that actually feature non-native speakers. And there are lots of examples, TED Talks, I don't know. Again, it all depends on the level of learners, actually, the proficiency levels. So again, it just comes down to the teacher to make a sound and informed decision. What to include, right? Think about the suitability, the level of interest, their hobbies. Also, we have lots of podcasts that might be carried out through these digital devices anywhere. And finally, something I really actually do, streaming TV channels from around the world. So depending on your level of taste, right? You might just watch news channels, entertainment channels, even cartoons, or even religious channels like Islam channel or EBT, some Christian channels, documentary channels. So we have all the resources, and you might reach all these resources after the presentation because there's a link to useful active resources where you can find all these channels. So maybe most of you know these movies, right? English, in a kind of a Bollywood movie in which there are a group of students trying to learn English in New York, and they all have their accents, cultural stuff, even cultural expressions. They also trans language. For example, Pakistani or Indian speakers, if they can understand each other, they switch to their own languages and they explain what they've just discussed. This is quite interesting, actually, because the lack of familiarity in the long term leads to these pejorative and negative attitudes about the accents, especially the non-native accents. And after a while, after a long while, it's quite difficult to change these attitudes, actually, or because most of the students transform these into entrenched beliefs. So they stop questioning. They just take it as assumed, or they just take it granted. So something like a cartoon, a comic character, Sapande, you might again find it on the internet. You're going to see the heavy Indian accent, but it's quite funny and interesting. Probably even high school learners might like watching these actually, series. Just a bit of taste, but probably you cannot hear, so I'm going to just here you can find it and how heavy the Indian accent is within these, cartoon actually. Again, stereotypical representations of accents in movies like Russians in Hollywood movies. There's this YouTube channel, you can find movie clips. And you can feel the heavy accent actually with the strong R sounds and S sound actually. Again, it also applies to the German accent. Spanglish, a Spanish nanny in the United States, something similar again. So Mind Your Language, the TV series that was also quite popular like 30 years ago. I still watch it sometimes because it's quite fun. Again, a group of learners from different cultural, racial background is trying to learn English with a UK-based actual teacher in a language schools, and lots of controversies that are caused by differences in culture or the misuse of actual phrases. But the funny thing, mostly non-native speakers or the course takers could understand themselves better than the UK-based teacher actually. This is quite important. So it does not only apply to non-native speakers, right? Raising learners' awareness. How about these non-standard native Englishes like Irish English, Scottish English? These are also different. And this is something, again, we can rarely find being represented in course books. Course books are very native English oriented, even in their actual audio files, in the representation of cultural artifacts. You're going to see stuff from UK, from the United States, maybe rarely from some leading countries like from China, let's say, or top 8. So the third one, outside schools meet and greet, talk, or interview, right? So although the title of the webinar just focuses on global English classrooms, I cannot actually separate schools from the outside world. Just thinking about the function of school, right? If we want to prepare learners or equip them with skills, knowledge that we want them to transfer into daily life, right? We should also think about the outside of the school. So extramural activities or extracurricular activities might be also quite functional in this sense. So giving or assigning students different tasks which involves them, right, to interact with foreigners with different people, with people who can't speak Turkish. They might again actually experience things through this first-hand interaction. And they're gonna see most of the stuff that we actually form in our minds, like sounding like a native speaker, the accent, the posh accent, doesn't help much in interaction. There are lots of other stuff actually that actually contributes to the effective communication, like, let's say, proxemics, kinesics, how close can somebody write to another person, or phrases, or how you actually correct yourself in the case of misunderstanding, non-understanding, these pragmatic strategies. To what extent we actually train students in terms of these strategies? Actually, not at all. When we look at the course books, there is no part, no section on teaching these kind of useful communicative strategies actually, but these are more very useful, especially in the case of intercultural encounters, communicating with people from different ethno-linguistic backgrounds. These are quite important. So again, this is from printed media from Istanbul. As you know, Istanbul is quite popular for the tourists. A state school just sent their students to, let's say, certain places, certain sightseeing areas in Istanbul, so that they could practice their English. You might just think that maybe the purpose was not to raise these students' awareness about diversity, but as a byproduct, it is also the case, right? Because the students are going to interact with these tourists. And as you know, tourists from different countries all around the world come to Istanbul. So in a way, these students actually will get exposure to different accents, to different ways of pronunciations. And maybe this is not the first or ultimate purpose of the school, but it's going to happen. It's going to occur through it, thanks to these hands-on experiences. And another one, for example, there's this actually again YouTube channel asking students, right, giving some kind of semi-structured interview questions. So what do you think about Turkish people's English level? Even the tourists make lots of funny and interesting comments, like saying they are shy, they get away from us when we ask a question. They were quite surprised about the low level of Turkish speakers' English proficiency, because they have expectations, because thinking that Istanbul is the hub, like an international hub for tourists, it's really hard to find English speaking or proper English speaking, let's say, other than Tarzanish people. Everyone again from a kind of media coverage, Yüksekoğlu çocuklar turist yardım oluyor. So even in Hakkari, you might just come across someone from Switzerland, not a traveler, traveling across Turkey, and under the guidance of the English language teacher. You can also watch the video here. I provided a link, so you can see how students are actually talking about their cities, the key places, sightseeing areas, the local food, traditional, let's say, customs, values, norms, whatever you might actually. So to me, at first, it sounds like they just memorized, but like at least this is something, like, because still they're interacting, and the good thing, they can understand their interlocutor. That's quite clear. So they can understand the tourist, Andrea, in this case. I really like the idea. So this is quite surprising, actually. So look, I'm going to repeat myself one more time. It all just comes down to a teacher, right? Because the greater responsibility falls on the shoulders of the teacher. He just left his comfort zone, took some initiative. Otherwise he would just leave the school and does his own stuff. This is also an option, which most teachers actually do, unfortunately. How about engaging students in linguistic discussion, right? Especially this might be done with students at high level of English proficiency. Here, I've just provided 2 screenshots from YouTube again. In this one, there's this Hindu man, a yoga master, and there's this Chinese reporter interviewing him. But the interesting thing, there is this inherent captions and subtitles here. So without actually letting students see the video, you might just, as teacher, ask the students to guess about their identities, right? And later on, you might do the same with this American yoga master. As you see, there's no inherent subtitles or captions. Then you might just show these screenshots and ask them, okay, why there is this inherent subtitles here in this video and not in this one? It also brings us to the issue of power and legitimacy. Also the assumptions that we hold about these non-native speakers. Probably the idea is that their English is not that much intelligible. So there's this actually supportive, the aid, right, the subtitles, so that the readers or watchers can understand them. However, in the case of this American speaker, this is not something needed actually, right? It actually gives us lots of implications, sends some kind of subconscious messages. Who is legitimate, who is much more intelligible. It was even the case for some Turkish actually politicians before, when they were actually interviewed, I guess on Hard Talk, the speaker, the English or the American speaker, there were no subtitles for him, but for the Turkish politician, whenever he starts speaking, the subtitles appeared on screen. This also shows the attitude towards the speakers and their actually ways of using English. So why it's important to engage in meta-linguistics? So which means actually talking about the language, right, or issues around language. Yes, you might actually expose learners to diversity, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be receptive, right? You have to actually help them reflect on their beliefs as well. Also practices. As I showed a certain set of questions actually. Where shall I use English, right? With whom I'm going to use English? To what extent? Or I can also use my own resources, like say something in Turkish, then explain it. Sometimes we might be lost for a word in English, or you might just describe it, right? Using a kind of a strategy, a kind of a coping strategy. These are all important, especially to help learners to question their convictions and beliefs. And later on, they might actually realize, yes, they've never questioned such kind of convictions, but they're not that much useful actually. Again, this is also sometimes I do with the first graders in the last years. I just show them some kind of, famous singers and the lyrics of their songs. They don't see anything wrong with the lyrics, but there are lots of non-standard usages. But instead of Jennifer Lopez, if it was one of my students here standing and singing the song, probably they wouldn't think the language use is correct, right? Why? An American singer, she has the right to use in the way like she likes, like in a non-standard way. In the case of non-native speakers, or let's say in our case Turkish speakers, this will be immediately actually regarded as an error, mistake, a deficit in the language proficiency of the speaker. So again, this brings us to these power issues, who can legitimize, who might be considered a legitimate speaker. And it's time to challenge this through such kind of, again, meta-linguistic discussions, especially with students whose level of English is high, who might, maybe high school students. It might be maybe difficult with students at the secondary or primary school levels, but with high school students, and even that discussion might take place in Turkish. I guess there's nothing wrong with having a discussion in Turkish about English. As Vildan said, we should not insist on English actually. Sometimes this might be much more practical to make them much more actually open-ended and develop their tolerance against or towards divergent uses or deviations from the standard norms. That's the main problem of students actually. They like to transfer what they've just seen in the book. So a kind of a bookish English cannot be the norm in speaking actually, or in speech, because speech has different standards. But unfortunately, while we are aware of this when it comes to L1, like Turkish, nobody speaks the Turkish in the same way. But however, when it comes to English, there's this expectation, sounding like native speakers. But why should I sound like a native speaker while having a conversation with the students from Afghanistan, from Poland, from Ukraine, for example? What's the point? If it's a personal choice, of course, we should actually respect the choice. But if it's something enforcement on learners, this is something we're against as, I guess, teacher educators. And finally, there are lots of actual resources and activities I might mention, but due to time limit, I'd like to suggest a course book, again, co-edited by Fuad Selvi. You might see, especially language teachers and student teachers, lots of practical exercises and tasks that are actually tried and tested in different contexts around the world. So please, if you're into this issue, because I know you're here at this time of the night, get the book. You're gonna find it quite useful. So having said this, I'd like to thank you for your patience and bearing with me. And here, a self-promotion. This is our Instagram account for Makuelti. One of our dear students is actually running the account. Idil, I guess she's also among us, and I ought to thank her as well. So thank you, Özge.
Thank you for your great presentation.
It was a little bit speedy, but considering the time, I just said maybe it's going to be better.
No, it was good. Thank you very much. Yeah, so
And
think-
sorry for my voice, it's still creaky, but I did my best with some herbal tea, but
Oh, get well soon then.
thank you so much, hopefully.
Now I would like to move to the questions in the Q&A part. Actually, maybe Ali Hocam, you can stop sharing the screen. Then yes, we can see all the speakers. And before we start the Q&A, you can see the project website in the chat box and our social media accounts. And also regarding the question, Ali Fuad Hocam, thank you very much for your time and effort for answering more than 15 questions. I think I can see your replies. Thank you very much for this. And Vildan Hocam replied one question as well. So just jumping to the one question, I would like to start with the question addressing the Yasemin Hocam. And somebody asked, when do you think preparatory classes are most effective, before the 5th or 9th grade?
I think we need to look at the, you can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Well, I think we need to look at the SLA research findings. Recently, some countries have discontinued teaching English in primary education. So they are starting English language teaching from secondary school level. So this corresponds to our grade 5. So this may suggest that okay, preparatory year means having intensive English language teaching. Well, of course, younger ages would have more, receptive abilities towards learning English and other languages, particularly in terms of pronunciation, and also the idea of the earlier the better principle. I would think that grade 5 would be more useful in terms of having this program.
Okay. Thank
It
you
also
very much.
depends on context, on the program, on the curriculum, on the number of teaching hours, on the exposure to English and how
Okay,
students are exposed.
Thank you very much. And all participants are thanking you all for all great presentations. And moving to the second question, what was the key factors implementing new curriculums and how the changes influence the success of the students, along with the pros and cons? Maybe this is a bit of general question for everyone. So the key factors implementing new curriculums, what were the key factors implementing new curriculums, and the pros and cons in regard with this? So this is an, I think, open question, so everyone can just...
Okay, if you don't mind, I'd like to start, and my friends would continue. Well, since we live in this globalized era, some curriculum update and curriculum change, curriculum innovation is almost inevitable, impossible. So it is true for all countries in the world. We need to have a look at the kind of changes introduced and how they impact on English language learning. To me, the kind of changes introduced, as I try to illustrate, have been very effective because we started with a very, with a very basic curriculum in 1997, and in the year 2005, it was expanded, as I try to illustrate, while there were some other ideas in addition to, well, communicative language teaching was encouraged to be practiced, to get students to communicate. Multiple intelligences was introduced into the curriculum, and we had new assessment measured measures like authentic assessment was introduced. Teachers were encouraged to complement traditional assessment measures like, multiple choice type of thing with more authentic assessment tools like portfolio. Portfolio was introduced into the system, which was really good. So we needed that kind of change. And in the year 2013, we had a curriculum framework. We tried to align it with the Common European Framework of Reference in terms of level descriptions. So teachers started to be more critical about what they are teaching, whether what they teach corresponds to A1, A2, B1, B2. They became more aware of, those level descriptions, learning outcomes, and so on. All these are quite positive improvements in our curriculum change, and we are hoping that they have a positive effect on the learning process, and we need to have a look at the classroom situation, research findings.
Okay, thank you very much.
To have more objective evaluation of that.
Oh, thank you very much, yes. And anyone who wants to add something?
Özge, maybe
Yes.
I might add a few remarks because
Yes.
a few years ago, I did a research, a documentary analysis into these high school English language teaching curriculum. And what was striking in the introductory part was that it actually refers and defines English as an international language, also mentions about its lingua franca role. Unfortunately, it fails to offer any suggestions about how it could be taught or taught in this way. And also, it still refers to the actual approaches and methods of the traditional understanding of communicative competence, like that emerged in 1980s. So that was quite actually, I guess, traditional. But on one hand, there's this mention, but it actually does not provide a framework. Okay, it's a lingua franca, but how it could be taught as a lingua franca, as an international language. And another problem, most of our teachers actually are not aware of the curricular objectives. When you read these objectives and the statements, they all look shine on the paper, like assessing 4 major skills. But when we look at these classroom practices, speaking is ignored, listening is ignored. It's just pen and paper-based exams. And there's no actually these, it's also in terms of assessment. Again, Arif Alıcan mentioned it, right? How are we going to assess these learners? Because there's no speaking part, written part, and mostly multiple choice and fill in the blanks. I guess we cannot progress from there, right? By just sticking to these traditional ways of assessing, mostly focusing on the grammatical competence, will not lead us to excellence, actually. I don't know what Arif Alıcan we might just say about it, but this is how
you're absolutely right. When we said that we need to rethink and revamp everything, so it should be a broader conversation that needs to involve all stakeholders involved in the ELT, not just teachers. Of course, teachers are the ones who are working in the trenches, so to speak, who are working tirelessly and endlessly with language learners. But of course, they are the ones who are actually working, or actually putting together different pieces of the puzzle. So this should be a conversation that needs to involve, as one of the participants mentioned about the Ministry of Education, for example, teacher educators like us who are working with the pre-service teachers, and of course, Minister of National Education are working with the in-service teachers, material designers, assessment designers, and everyone, even broader stakeholders like the administrators and the parents as well. So if we're talking about revamping everything, so this really needs to be a broader conversation. So I definitely agree with you in that regard.
May I add one point?
Yes, sure.
In fact, in my presentation, I mainly had primary and secondary levels of education, and Ali Hocam added high school education in relation to curriculum. My interest very much focused on primary and secondary level. So yes, high school curriculum is, might be referring to such topics that I didn't mention. Well, of course, there is a gap between the curriculum, but teachers should consult the curriculum. They should have it in their Zümre toplantıları. And this is one thing that I am telling my students as well in the teacher education department. They should, well, they come together, they have discussions, but they should take the curriculum document and they should try to interpret it. They should try to discuss how they will, put all those, learning objectives. I'm sure they are doing it into practice in the most effective way, so that students can gain the competence to speak, to communicate through English. This is very important.
Yeah, thank you for the final recommendation about this topic, and thank you all for answering. Yes, and again, I would like to jump back the one question that was replied by Ali Fuad Hocam. Thank you, Ali Fuad Hocam, again for all your replies to questions. And in case you want to voice your reply, I would like to repeat the question here. And it is, are there any different learning strategies between normal teaching and global English teaching approach? So in case you want to make comment, Ali Fuad Hocam and the other speakers.
Well, I don't think we can only talk about one strategy or method or something, as Ali Fuad Hocam and I also mentioned, I think, because it's here we are not talking about a new theory. We are talking about a new lens, new way of looking at the things. That's why, as all the participants mentioned, all the components of education system should be renegotiated and rethought, actually. So we can't say, I don't think, from my eyes, we can't say, okay, global. It's about the attitude of the teacher, about attitude of the students. So it's not that you can take one method or one activity and with some twists and touches, you can easily make it, and change it and fit it into your classroom. So here, that's why we talked about macro and the micro strategies, because we know that one method or it fits all kind of thinking is not suitable at our age and at this global world.
Yes,
No, I agree with Hocam. I'd like to, I'm not going to repeat what I wrote there, so well, our attendees can just go ahead and take a quick look at it. But one thing I would like to add is one essential thing that we need to embrace within this broader conversation is about the learner's preferences and choices. In other words, if your language learners, and if you talk about sort of the broadening sociolinguistic diversity and changing sociolinguistic realities around us, sort of the English serving as a lingua franca right here, right now in this webinar with participants coming from different parts of the world, right? We're relying on a common language to integrate, so on and so forth. You can talk about all these, but after all, if your students would still prefer to say, you know what, my goal in language learning is to be and sound like native speakers of English from the United States or UK or Ireland or Australia, so on and so forth. This is not something that GELT opposes, right? So if this is what students want to do as their learning strategies, as their learning goals, etc., this would be their choice, this would be their human rights. So opposing this would be exerting the status quo in a reverse direction. This is something that we shouldn't be doing at all, because this is what the standard English ideology has been doing for so many centuries. So this is one thing that I would like to add in this regard. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, voicing again, yes, your reply. And thank you very much for all speakers. Actually, it was very nice tonight. We had almost 400 participants. And I would like to thank to our participants who stay until the end. And most importantly, big thank you to our speakers to be with us tonight. So I think the webinar will be over here. And for further updates, you can follow us on